Hey, do you remember when you first went to college or university? For many people around the world, their first experience of a Canadian urban center is when they load up their suitcase and head off to school. Our guest today is David Burke. He's at Ryerson University, located in the heart of downtown Toronto. Now, normally at this time of year, as people are going back to school, there's a lot of excitement in the air. And this year, though, I think there's a little less excitement and perhaps a little more anxiety, a little more trepidation. As I am walking around here on the campus of University of Windsor, what should be bustling with students is more like a ghost town. It feels like off-season, even though school has started up. So, what's going on in the lives of students as they head off to school this year? For some that grew up in the church and they were on fire for God in their youth group, they end up in college or university and away from all of their support and their family and all of the things that made them feel secure. Many begin to question their faith or leave their faith. David Burke felt the call of God and became a Mission Canada worker in the city that he grew up in Toronto. And he and a team of others at Ryerson University are making a difference in the lives of students that are coming from all over the world to study. Now, while students normally would be coming looking forward to urban life, looking forward to being with new friends and being able to enjoy more than just the books. Instead of this being a time of excitement for a lot of students, this is actually a time of increased anxiety and trepidation. Working online from their dorm room or staying at home and taking courses online. So ministries like David has to students have to adapt and change and find ways to connect with students where it is not as easy as it was in the days of people wandering freely about. Well, I think you're going to enjoy this interview with David Burke, and I interviewed him earlier this year. Let's go to that interview right now and meet David Burke. So David, if I was a girl from Fleming, Saskatchewan, or I was a young man from Lagos, Nigeria, coming for the first year to Ryerson University in downtown Toronto, talk to me about what happens to students coming for the first time into downtown Toronto to be a part of Ryerson.
Great question. It's interesting specifically that you said Lagos, Nigeria, because we've had 3 students specifically from Lagos, Nigeria. And Ryerson has always been a really popular location for international students. Because it is so downtown, the experience that you would get at Ryerson, that you do get at Ryerson, is probably different than any other university. And so some students come because of the specific program that's offered. Some come because of what they've heard about kind of the subculture at Ryerson. The experience, whether it's the student from Saskatchewan or the student from Nigeria, would depend on the kind of person, I suppose. But largely, it would be one of being able to be exactly who they are without having to assimilate at all. So being able to be themselves with respect to, again, if they're coming from Nigeria, being able to be exactly who they are and bring all of the facets of their culture and their heritage and their identity. And same from the student coming from the small town. They can be as involved or as little involved as they want. And so Ryerson is very much a commuter campus. The vast majority of students live in the GTA, some of them the outer GTA, and commute in. There is residence, but it's very small. And so the vast majority of students, it's cheaper to live either in apartments spattered around downtown, or Scarborough or North York, etc. So students that are commuters particularly have a hard time finding community on campus. Because Ryerson, one of the things that it's known for is enabling students to come in, study, do what they need to do, and then get on with their life back home. And so sometimes students struggle to find connection on campus. Sometimes it's because they're connected back home, and sometimes, to the student that's coming from elsewhere, they actually want connection, but because the campus isn't necessarily geared toward that, Ryerson isn't a campus that gets you involved unless you want to be involved. And so there's lots of campus clubs and groups and causes for students to get involved in, but a student would have to, more often than not, seek that out. And so community doesn't tend to happen at Ryerson on its own.
With before the time that we're currently in, what has been the average population of Ryerson?
Yeah, so when we started in 2013, it was 28,000. And as of 2019, it was 47,000. So it's grown really quickly.
It's the size of a small city.
Exactly, that's very much how I think about it, as a city within a city, with its own subculture and its own values and its own identity. And because of the way that the downtown is situated, you can actually stroll through Ryerson and not even realize that you're there. And so in addition to students, we have young families, we have homeless people, we have addicts, we have kind of every person from every walk of life. It's kind of this beautiful fishbowl of the downtown core, which I love.
Yeah. Now, you grew up in Toronto, and I know your parents, Paul and Vicky. I've met your sister, and you all grew up there together. And when you think back to the early days, and in fact, I went to school with your parents, so that's how old I am.
That's cool.
Yeah. But when you think back to your early days as a kid growing up in Toronto, and you think about the Toronto that you're in now as an adult, what kind of things have changed just in your lifetime in your city?
So the context that I grew up in, church-wise, my parents planted a church called Cornerstone that was very much geared towards not just people who didn't like church necessarily, but for people who weren't welcome in church or people who felt unwelcome in church. And so I grew normal church for me was church with somebody sitting the pew next to us that was intoxicated, somebody who was disheveled, but then at the same time there were people there that were very affluent, and so it was this beautiful mix of different cultures, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and people some who wore their brokenness on their sleeve, and some who hid it a little bit better. So that was what normal church was for me, and I love that, and that really informed the way that I see church and the way that I see Jesus. It was, kind of the line that was drawn was, as long as someone was clothed in some way, they were welcome to come. And so people would come without shoes sometimes, and they were given shoes, and even sometimes we would have people that would come, without shirts or pants, and they were given a shirt or pants, and so there was this beautiful, messy nature of faith. And I'm really thankful that I had that. So to your question, what's changed in Toronto over the last 20 years or so from being a kid to now? Gentrification has meant that poverty's been moved around. So, the neighborhood that Cornerstone was in, over time became more known as a more affluent neighborhood, and people that lived there were pushed elsewhere to another neighborhood. And then, once that neighborhood was gentrified, then they were pushed to another neighborhood. And so I would say that the systemic issues that cause and perpetuate poverty haven't necessarily been addressed so much as the surface level symptom has just been kind of moved around. And so sometimes people will come to the city and be like, wow, it looks so much quote unquote nicer than it did in the 90s or the 80s, etc. It's still the same city. It's just those pockets of poverty and messiness and beauty have just been kind of relocated time and time again. So it's still the same city, I think just organized differently, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Your parents, Paul and Vicky, have in their lifetimes been such a gift to Toronto and a gift to our tribe, the Pentecostal assemblies as well. They helped show a lot of us what grace looks like in the urban core, and so that's a great heritage that you were born into. How did Jesus get your attention and convince you to pursue a life of ministry at Ryerson University?
So I knew that I was called to campus ministry when I was in high school. And so when God started to kind of whisper that to me, I was like, okay, cool. Got to finish high school first. Got to get my post-secondary degree. And so kind of put it on the back burner, figuring that it would be, 5, 10, 15, 20 years after graduating from Bible college. And every so often God would just kind of whisper again, about the campus and the need on campuses. And when I was in my fourth year, it just so happened that I was doing my internship at a church that was trying to reach onto a campus. And so a part of what I was doing, in my internship was being a part of that outreach onto campus. They were doing Alpha on Algonquin College in Ottawa. And it's just funny how God works all things together.
Which church was that?
Woodvale.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic
were
church.
You there with Mark Scar?
So Mark Scar is the lead pastor, and I got to do I've done so many hospital visits with Mark Scar. Like I was there for 4 months, and I probably did, I don't even know, a fifth of the hospital visits that he actually went on during that time. He took me on, and I think I did like over 30 visits with him.
If I was in a hospital bed dying, I would want Mark Scar to come and pray for me.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And so I mean, that had a huge effect on me. And during the time of being involved on Algonquin College, God very much took it off the back burner and put it on the front burner, and started to whisper louder and louder about campus, and very much clarified for me that when I graduated, that was the time. And I remember having this ongoing conversation for a while over that time, where I kind of think of it as my Moses-esque conversation, and that God was asking me to go, and I had all these reasons why I was saying no. And I was like, God, I'm too young, I'm too inexperienced, I will have just finished my degree, and I've just been married, all the different reasons, all of my own insecurities and inadequacies. And I felt so strongly that God said, those are all the reasons that I want you to go now, because you know that nothing is going to happen in your own strength. And that's very much been every step of the road. Our prayer, among many other things, has been that God would do something so much wilder and crazier and beyond my own capabilities that people would be able to look on and say, I know David, and I know that he's not capable of that. Ergo, it has to be God. It's just been cool to kind of lean into that. And
so you're happy to be God's wingman.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
So you went through some steps to get yourself placed at Ryerson, Mission Canada. Talk about some of the steps of discerning that and how you ended up there and what you started to do.
Yeah, so I actually got connected with Mission Canada, again, when I was in high school. At the time, the director of campus ministry in Canada was Rob Powell. And honestly, I don't even remember how I got connected with Rob, but I just remember that I did and was talking with him. And at the time it was George Warner.
Yep.
And they were very much like fanning the flame,
Yeah.
and really excited and very much kind of pouring gasoline on this fire that God was creating in my heart. And so I had known about Mission Canada right from the time that God had started to speak to me about campus ministry. And as things kind of converged, I happened to stumble into a meeting downtown Toronto where a bunch of PAOC pastors were talking about the need for a Pentecostal ministry or a Pentecostal presence at Ryerson University. And so I'd already known God was calling us to campus. And so I was like, I wasn't supposed to be in this meeting. I wonder if this is God. Like, I wonder if this isn't just a coincidence. And so from there, started spending time online researching the demographics and statistics and trying to get an understanding of what the campus is like, but also spending time physically on the campus and walking around and watching students. Who are they? What are they doing? Where are they going? And trying to listen to what the Spirit of God would say. It was one thing that I was really impacted by with my parents is they told me this story of walking up and down Yonge Street right when they first came to Toronto, and that they did that because they were watching people to get a burden for them, listening to the heart of the Father. And so over that period of walking the campus and listening to the Spirit and doing research into demographics, God just made it so clear to me that Ryerson was to be my home, was to be my home away from home, that's where he was calling me.
So that was when?
It would have been 2012, early 2012.
Wow.
And so it took about 6 months to a year going through the process to become a Mission Canada worker, get credentials with EOND.
Which is our Eastern Ontario district.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. With PAOC, and got approved as a Mission Canada worker, went through the process to fundraise, and then September 10th, 2013 is when we, after going through all that process, that's when we launched Lifeline.
Paul talks about this ministry of reconciliation that we've been given. And reconciliation is something that is called upon where there are hostilities and barriers and every reason to hate and distance from others. So how has your ministry at Ryerson been about reconciliation? What does it mean to have a Christian presence or even a Pentecostal presence in an environment that is it a environment that needs reconciliation to the claims of Jesus?
100%. Ryerson is a environment where I would say the spiritual soil is hard. Sometimes I've even jokingly said that there is soil, but there's concrete above it, that, we had to first smash through the concrete to get to the soil. And I would say that Ryerson is not anti-Christ, but anti-religion, anti-Christianity. And I think it, because of what it has come to know of certain facets of Christian religion, it's come to associate those things with Christ. And so a lot of times we're having to first try and undo or help them unlearn things that they have heard about Jesus that are not true.
Right.
So because Ryerson is right at Yonge and Dundas, most students get to campus via Dundas Station. And you'll know if you come out of Dundas Station, you're likely to literally physically bump into, maybe not now with COVID, but bump into one or two of at least 3 street preachers that are there. And the ones that I can think of specifically, and the ones that I know that are there, tend to preach a message of wrath and hatred. And so that is most Ryerson students' first exposure to Jesus, quote unquote, and faith and religion every single day. So by the time we meet them later on that day, the preconceived notions that they have of who God is are very different than the God that we're trying to paint a picture of. And so it is difficult to sometimes convince students that what they have heard is not necessarily true. And so I think what we've always tried to do at Lifeline, instead of...
Lifeline is
the name of the campus church
Okay.
that I pastor and get a chance to serve at, is instead of trying to tear down this pre-existing idea, paint a better one, paint a truer one. I think the presence of God, the gospel, the good news is like a beautiful painting. It's like a song. It's like a symphony. And so we're trying to do it justice as best as we know how. And instead of raging against the church, whatever that means, we want to be an expression of it that is maybe more in keeping with what we read in the scriptures. And so specifically, my heart beats for and breaks for students who have felt marginalized by the church, students who have felt unwelcome in the church, atheists, agnostics, LGBTQ plus students, international students, people who have been hurt, I guess. And so that's my heart. That's my hope. That's my jam.
Tell me some stories, happy stories. People that in your time at Ryerson, where you've just seen things that brought a sense of purpose and joy and excitement to you. Yeah,
for me, those stories are the ones where students find us somehow, whether they stumble in because they hear music coming out of the room that we use in the student center, and they stay and they get a chance to hear God spoken of in a different way. Those are always my favorite. I think of one student in particular who we've gotten a chance to journey with for a number of years, and even now post-graduation, who when we first met them very much identified as an atheist, and wasn't just necessarily like there is no God, so like it is what it is, but more so like anti-God, I guess you could say.
Anti-theist.
There you go.
Yeah.
And over the course of years, having this particular student, come once in a while, to then come more often, to then come every week, to then come to Bible studies, to then come to social events, and to have this person very much become a part of our church family. And I think that's the goal, is that people would, that they would belong first, and then believe, and then become. And so it's been a number of years now, even since this person has graduated, and they haven't crossed the line, so to speak, as yet. But to have conversations with them now is so much different than all those years ago. And I remember one particular conversation where they said, I'm not there yet. I don't believe yet, but if I do, it would have to be in the kind of God that you guys have been talking about all these these years, one who is for me and not against me, and one who loves me and one who created me with a purpose. And so that for me just fills me with such joy of somebody who was, far from God. God wasn't far from her, but she was far from him. And I love prodigal sons and daughters coming home, and I know and I believe that this person will come home, and I'm really looking forward to that. Another student who many people would maybe describe as further from God, maybe more liberal and believing things that wouldn't necessarily be in keeping with traditional church folk. And again, this person just became a part of our church family, and started coming more often. The first time that they came because they were invited by one of our leaders, and this leader of ours, it was her birthday, and instead of doing the things that she would have done in the past, going out with friends, etc., she decided that she wanted to have her birthday at our service that night, and so invited all these students who didn't yet know God. And that night happened to be a crazy snowstorm, and still a few of her friends came. And after the service had finished, we were having family dinner as we do every night and eating together. And I was talking to this one student, and they were saying, I almost didn't come because of all the things that I've experienced from the church before. But I'm so glad that I did. And then they came back the week after, and the week after, and the week after, and the week after, and getting a chance to build a relationship with this person, and getting a chance to know this person more and more and more. And a number of months into that journey, during our time of worship, I was playing the cajon, and I opened my eyes at one point and noticed that this person had their eyes closed during worship, and that wasn't typical for this person. They would be there for worship, but would just kind of stand there, and so their eyes were closed, and I just got this sense in my heart that God was doing something, and I was like, yes, God, like so excited. And later that evening, come to hear the story that this particular student, during that particular moment of worship, started to feel something that they hadn't felt before, and they said they started to feel really warm, and the warmth kind of turned into this heat, and they just felt like they needed to close their eyes, and so they closed their eyes, and when they closed their eyes, they described how they saw this light. And this light was like just beautiful and peaceful. And even though their eyes were closed, they weren't looking at the screen. They had never heard the song before. They all of a sudden just knew the lyrics to the song, and so started to sing along the lyrics to this song that they had never heard before. And it started to describe how in that moment they just felt something that they couldn't describe, something that felt like something they'd never felt before. And I'm standing there listening to them describe this experience, just grinning ear to ear as I am now. And I was like, dude, like, that's the presence of God. Like, that's where you were made to be. That's where you were born to exist. That's home. And they were like, oh, wow. Like, I didn't know that. And so it just gets me so jazzed to hear people who don't have any sort of churchy vocabulary or spiritual vernacular to describe what is the presence of God. To me, that is good news. That is prodigal sons and daughters coming from darkness and literally into light, right? And so again, that journey is not finished yet, but I am so excited for the day when they come to understand that the name of that light is Jesus.
Well, it sounds like an awful lot of what you're doing is reconciliation. You've got a ministry of reconciliation to help remove the barriers and give people an opportunity to see Jesus as he is, and not based on the gossip that they've heard about him. And that's beautiful. I'm sure that there's also been some heartbreaking times when people that you've given part of your life to and had seen potential in and prayed for, and then things didn't go the way that you hoped. Any sad stories that just kind of messed you up?
Lots.
Yeah.
As much as there's these beautiful stories that fill us with joy and hope, there's ones that sometimes I will drive home from an evening, from a service, Bible study, whatever it is, and just feel totally deflated and be like, God, like what am I doing? And I wish that those were few and far between. But there's definitely stories where we journey with students for a number of years and they graduate and we don't see them come to know Jesus. And that first story that I shared is one of those stories. And it's interesting because I remember so specifically the last service that they were at before graduation, and I knew that was going to be the last time, or I thought that was going to be the last time that we would see them, and praying, God, like I'm going to give an opportunity for them to come to know you this evening, and God, please, like it just it's this is in your hands, but I'd really love for this to happen this evening, and gave the opportunity at the end of a service, and they didn't. And I just felt so deflated and like such a failure. And a number of months later, they moved back to the city and have been coming ever since again. And so it was one of those moments where I thought I had failed and I thought the story was done and I thought God was finished. But he wasn't. The painting is not over. The song has not been sung yet. And so there are those stories where we have these incredible moments, but then the beauty in the story continues later on. There's another, so the first number of years, Lifeline was in the back of the campus pub it was called the VIP bar. So the campus pub is called the Ram and the Rye, and in the back behind the pool tables, there's this like separate little room, and that's where we were having church for a number of years. And maybe 3 or 4 years into that, I came in for our September launch, and I noticed that they had done major construction and completely demolished the wall that separated the VIP room from the rest of the bar. And so it was just open air. And the pool tables are like, 5 feet away, barriers. 100%. And so the sheer terror that we were supposed to, start our service that night, like 2 hours later. And I was like, God, do we cancel? Do we try and find another venue? And I felt like God was like, no, like, step out of the boat, which is funny because the message that God had given me for that evening was stepping out of the boat, right? Walking on water. And God was like, why do you think I gave you that message, right? It wasn't just for them, it was also for you. And so I was like, okay, God. And so we stepped out of the boat and we decided to still have church, and it was messy and it was loud. There would be moments in the months and years that followed. Again, there's no door, there's no wall, where we'd be in the middle of praying for a student who had, just said that their family member had been diagnosed with cancer, and we would be praying and somebody would start screaming at the top of their lungs or cursing or whatever, 4 feet away from us, drinking at the pool table, and we'd have to stop for a second until they finished and then continue on. And so while it was messy, we would also have students who would wander into our area, so to speak, simply because they heard music. They heard someone talking. And I remember there was this one student, and he came a half hour before service started and was like, hey, what are you guys up to? I heard you, playing some music and jamming and can I hang out with you guys? And we're like, absolutely. And so getting a chance to talk to this student for like a half hour and talk about Jesus and share the gospel. And, he shared that he was an atheist and didn't believe in God, but for whatever reason decided to stay all the way through worship and sang with us and jammed with us and got into it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like how cool is this, right? That we get to do this thing that students just wander in because they hear the song, right?
Yeah.
And didn't see that student for years afterward. Like he just didn't come. And again, I was like, God, he came once and never came again. What did I do wrong? And last year, I happened to run into that particular student at the campus groups fair. And I, by the grace of God, happened to remember his name. And I said, hey, addressed him by name. And he was like, oh my gosh, like I haven't seen, I I can't believe you remember my name. And I was like, yeah, dude, like, how are you? You know, when we met all those years ago, you know, this is what you shared with me, and, you know, this was your story. And he was just flabbergasted that
you remembered,
that I remembered, and seeing the look on his face that somebody remembered something from so long ago, in this moment where the student center is crowded with hundreds of students everywhere, he just opened up and started sharing his story and what he was going through, and the turmoil in his home and in his family. And it's one of those moments where me and my human nature, I wanted to do the thing where, like, cool, I'm going to pray for you later this evening. And I was like, okay, God, like, you know, I'm ready to move on here. And I felt like the Spirit was like, no, I want you to pray for him right here, right now. And that's not my comfort zone. Like, that's not me at all. And so I was like, oh, God. And so I said, like, hey, dude, like, you know, are you okay if I just pray for you right now? And he looked at me and he was like, yeah, like I'd like that. And so I laid hands on him and prayed for him right there. It's loud. There's people everywhere, but got a chance to pray for him in his specific situation. And I think for him, that was a reminder that the God that he didn't believe in still believed and remembered him. Wow. And so sometimes there's these moments where, to me, it seems like this one-off opportunity, right? Where I feel like I'm sowing seed and nothing is happening, nothing is growing. And I'm like, God, like, am I failing? And again, God reminds me that the song is not finished, that the symphony is not done, right? That the painting is still being painted. And so definitely lots of those stories where I leave feeling deflated, but God reminds me that he's not finished.
It's definitely a lesson in patience with everything.
And I'm not naturally a patient person, so God
I guess
has
that's
to
gonna
work
have
on
to
me.
change.
Yes, he's definitely working on me in that.
Yeah. Flip your hat there for a minute to your Red Frog hat.
Yeah.
And tell people, what is Red Frogs?
Yeah.
And what's your role with Red Frogs?
Yeah. So Red Frogs is an international support network that exists to safeguard a generation. So it started about 20 years ago in Australia, with a guy named Andy Gorley, and he was a pastor at a local church who would go to skate parks and hang out with students, build a relationship and sow into them, and be able to kind of disciple them where they were, and you know, invite them to come to church and sow seeds. And in Australia, there's this thing called schoolies, which is basically after they graduate, it's like a week-long Mardi Gras-esque booze fest, like drugs, alcohol, sex, all the things. And there's no parental supervision. So 17,000 students descend on the Gold Coast in Australia, and it's just crazy. And so Andy knew that these students that he had been sowing into for years were going to schoolies. And so he was like, I'm not just going to like abandon them and just let them be there and, you know, potentially experience these harmful things. And so he tracked down which hotel that they were in, and he was like, I'm going to go find them and, you know, try and be with them where they are. I tried to get in, and the security guard was like, nah, man, you're not getting in. And so I went to the local store and picked up a bag of Red Frogs.
Those chewy candies.
Those chewy candies. In Australia, they call them Red Frogs lollies. And so he picked up a couple bags of those and went back to the security guard, and he was like, hey, man, I have some munchies for my kids. Can I like take them up? And he was like, oh, man, yeah, cool. And so he got in past the security guard and, you know, knocked on a bunch of doors and finally found them. And so that from there became his thing, that he would be present with students. And every time he would go, he would give out these little gummies in the shape of a red frog. And so he became known as like the Red Frogs dude. And fast forward 20 years, it's now in multiple countries. It's in Australia, it's in New Zealand, it's in Poland, South Africa, United Kingdom, Canada, United States, etc.
That strategy of going to be with students,
safeguarding a generation,
exactly,
and so
harm reduction,
exactly. And so instead of judging and picketing and things of that nature, knowing that students are going to party, that they're going to do things that could potentially negatively impact their lives, we want to be there and be a positive peer presence in that atmosphere. And so the beauty is that when we do that, when we serve with no strings attached, we do hydration stations, for example. We'll give out, you know, thousands of cups of water, gummies, cookies, donuts, pancake breakfasts, cafe crawls. We'll walk students back to their dorms to make sure that students are safe, not being assaulted or anything like that. When we do these things, almost every single time, the questions that students ask is why? Why are you doing this? And so evangelistically, it turns the tables because we're able to actually answer a question that they're asking instead of forcing an answer to a question that they're not asking us.
Right.
And so when they say, like, why are you doing this? It gives us an opportunity to begin to build a relationship, say, like, hey, we're doing this because we love you and because we love Jesus. Sometimes that conversation goes nowhere. Sometimes it's, hey man, bleep, whatever, I'm not interested. Sometimes it opens up these really beautiful conversations. Like one time we gave this female student a cup of hot chocolate, and it led to a half-hour conversation on divine healing and prayer. Just out on the streets, just outside of the student center, because we were serving.
Yeah.
And so these beautiful opportunities, again, to your point, to reduce harm, to protect students from physical harms, but also to be an expression of Jesus' generosity of his hands and feet, and to get a chance to share the gospel through relationship. So we got connected to Red Frogs a number of years ago. Ryerson actually contacted Red Frogs Canada and said, hey, could you guys come? We're doing this event, this concert. So our first event, we did a hydration station. It was a concert at the end of Frosh Week to like big boom, hurrah, yay. 6,000 students. It was outside on Gould Street, which is the main stretch that runs through campus. And the pivotal moment for me is, our tent was set up in the back, and the headlining artist was performing, and I watched as 6,000 students sang every lyric, every verse of songs that were like just dipped, infused, steeped in drugs, sex, violence, and misogyny. And I stood there in the back with tears in my eyes thinking, God, like, this isn't okay. These are your kids. These are your prodigals. And that wasn't, me coming to something new. That was just me coming to understand the Father's heart for his kids just a little bit more. Right. And so God kind of provoked this thought in me. What if there were, hundreds and hundreds or thousands and thousands of students one day that were worshiping God, that instead of singing these songs that were dripping in sex, violence, drugs, etc., that were glorifying the God who is a lover of their souls. And so Red Frogs is an opportunity for us to tangibly be an expression of his love.
Yeah, I often think of like when you go to big events like that where you'll have St. John Ambulance. There's this team of people that are there ready to respond to crisis.
Exactly.
And Red Frogs has a similar kind of thing. It's not medical, but they'll help get people to the medical help if they need it. But that presence. Or the Saint Bernard dog, right? Going to the fallen skier in the Alps.
Totally.
To find them and to provide the living warmth that's 100%. Needed. Yeah, that's great. Tell me about Giselle. We were hoping that Giselle could have been in on the interview with you, but she's, I guess, on vacation with family up in Peterborough. Tell me about her.
Yeah, so Giselle, she was the first student that we ever had. So when we launched on September 10, 2013, we had met upwards of like 1,000 students over the course of a year through like promoting and handing out cards. Hey guys, we're launching, this. And so much blood, sweat, and tears went into it. And on that launch night, we had 5 students. And again, that was one of those moments where I felt so deflated, where I walked away and being like, oh my gosh, God, what did I do wrong? But at the same time, one of those 5 was Giselle, the first student that we ever had. And she became our first student leader. She became our first student president when we got a group status. Like, she was with us from day one.
Wow.
And she...
So you thought it was your calling, but it was hers.
Oh my goodness gracious. Like, she it just like became sewn into the fabric of what Lifeline is. Like every step of the way, she helped shape it into what it is. Like as much as God used me, he had been using her since the very beginning. And it's so funny because we'd been praying for years, God, please give us another like full-time vocational staff person, like somebody who can minister side by side with us to these students. And praying for years, like, God, we know that you're going to bring this, like, who is this person? And right around the time that Giselle graduated, she had been applying to a number of agencies in her field that she had gotten her degree in, and opportunities and doors that should have been like a guarantee. She's very good at what she does, at what her degree is in. Those things just didn't pan out. And right in that time, God just kind of slapped me in the face with, hello, it's Giselle, like, hello. And so just made it really clear to me. And so, we just prayed about it. And we just were like, oh my gosh, it's just, how did we not see this? And so I remember so clearly meeting with Giselle in our little office on campus. Our office is like a closet. You can fit 2 chairs and that's pretty much it. And so meeting with her in our office and sharing the history of Lifeline, even though she'd known, right? She was with us since day one. And I was like, Giselle, we've been praying for years that God would bring us a staff person.
Was she part of the team that was praying that prayer, or was that more just you?
We had probably talked to her like about how we were looking for that, but again, never put 2 and 2 together in our mind that like it would be Giselle. And so, I shared with her and I was like, Giselle, we really feel like it's you. And as I'm sharing this, she is like crying, and not like, initially it started as one of those like, oh, like, like a CW or like a Hallmark movie, like this beautiful cry, right? It, at a certain point turns into kind of like a less beautiful cry, right? And so by the time I had finished sharing, it was more of a sobbing kind of cry, and I was like, ooh, like, have I messed up? Did I say something wrong here? Like, and she was like, oh my gosh, like this makes so much sense. Like, and it just felt like, 2 Lego pieces clicking together, right? Something, she didn't understand why all these job opportunities weren't working out. And as soon as we shared, it was like something in her spirit clicked, something in our spirit clicked. And so she went through the process to become a Mission Canada worker, to get credentials, to fundraise. And through that process, she like apprenticed with us and was kind of working with us without being paid, essentially. She was working, another job to pay her bills. And so this last September, she officially got deployed full-time. And so she's been working full-time with us on staff since this last September. And so interestingly, early on, I had this idea that like success in ministry was numbers. Like it was like crowds and like stages and lights and smoke and like all this kind of stuff. And Lifeline has never been that. And so God very much impressed upon me the story of Ananias, that before Saul became Paul, there was this like little known dude named Ananias who God called to pray for effectively a terrorist, right? Kind of somebody who nobody would have expected. And Ananias plays this role, this pivotal role in the transformation of him, going from Saul to radical change in character and becoming like a pillar in the faith and causing, the expansion of the church as we know it. And so God kind of impressed upon me this idea that I think a lot of us want to be Paul. We want to be the one, speaking to thousands. We want to be the Billy Grahams. We want to be crusades and the not negative term,
Yeah.
but just these massive moves.
We want to be the front man or the front woman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And more often than not, we're called to be the man before the man, or the person before the person who leads Billy Graham to Jesus, or Mother Teresa, or, insert world changer here. And so God was like, stop trying to be the big, massive thing and start looking for Paul. Start looking for the person who's going to change the world, and be content and in being the person before the person. Find the next Paul. And so I feel like Giselle is one of the first Pauls that has come out of Lifeline, that we were gifted this opportunity to disciple her, that God entrusted her to us, and that she is now in full-time vocational ministry, and she is doing things that I can't do. She is reaching people that I can't reach. She is this mother figure, this aunt figure to so many of our young women, and is able to help them find their identity in Jesus, and is able to reach them in a way that I'll never be able to. Yeah. And so whether or not she sees that in herself, that is how I see Giselle, as kind of the first.
Giselle, if you're listening to this podcast, listen up.
Yeah. So,
somebody's trying to tell you something here.
Yeah, she's we're so thankful for her. And also, just to clarify, she was not living a Saul-esque life before, but just in that us being able to play a role as the person before the person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Ananias had a very simple task, but a very daunting task, to go and pray for the reconciliation in Paul. And once Jesus did the reconciling work, I'm sure that until Ananias was an old man with grandkids, he probably was telling the story. I went and I prayed with that guy.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And
I haven't had an opportunity to use the buzzword yet, so let's pivot here and talk a little bit about you and your family. So tell me about your wife and your kids.
Yeah, so I am married to Krysten. She is my best friend. I love her more now today than I did when we got married. Not because I didn't love her back then, but my capacity for love and my understanding for love, I feel like, has just grown so much. And it's still a long way to go, still so much to learn, but I just love her so much. And so we have two kids. Emma is 5 and Sam just turned 2, and they are incredible, and they are mischievous and beautiful and wild and wonderful and confusing and complicated and frustrating all at the same time. And so we're thankful that God has entrusted these future world changers to us, and get a chance to raise them together. Krysten works for an organization called Global 180, and they get a chance to kind of do youth ministry outside the box in the community, outside the 4 walls of the church. And so they do that in a number of different ways. And so we are involved in each other's respective ministries and callings. And so it's kind of two different shared dreams, if that makes sense, that are connected, and we're both able to be involved in these things and sow in seeds and serve in each other's ministries and vocations behind the scenes. That's the
beautiful
gist of my family.
This has been during the shutdown season. This has been a very stressful time for pretty much everybody, and yet also I think a time of uncovering, unveiling what's going on inside us, but also the unveiling of what might God be up to, and So I just wonder, through this time, how has this time affected you? How's it affected your wife? And what are you learning in this season that you might not have learned if you were spending the summer ramping up to be full-blown on campus, which you can't right now. So this has shifted everything. So in the shift, what are some of the dust bunnies that you discovered in the corner? What are some of the things that have surprised you, or you have become more aware of?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's positives and negatives, I think, that this pandemic has revealed. I don't know in myself that it's necessarily created new issues so much as it's revealed ones that were already there. To your point, dust bunnies in the corner. Yeah. And so there's definitely been some of that, trying to clean dust. I would say one of those things is busyness. I think is in ministry elevated and celebrated. Pastors who are workaholics, that is like applauded, until it's not, until it leads to a fall. And so I don't want to be one of the people in ministry who work so hard to build church and sacrifice family. I've got my own journey and my own kind of family history with that, but I want to be someone that is intentional about pastoring my family first, and leading my family first, and living with margin so that God can still write in the margin and still breathe life. And so it's not something that I'm naturally good at. I like to be busy. And recently read this book by John Mark Comer called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and very much about slowing down and about how Jesus was never in a hurry, that we don't see Jesus running, we don't see Jesus, out of breath, that Jesus has this slow rhythm, this slow pace, and often taking time away to pray and to think and to commune with the Father. And so something that we probably all know, but for whatever reason, this book just really was like, whoa, I need to. And
that's so countercultural to the life of a university student.
Yes.
Or anybody that's, in the race downtown.
100%.
Yeah. So do you feel that there's something emerging there for you about being slower?
Yeah, I'm trying to be more intentional about it. Not always successful. One of the things that he talks about in the book is that often the cause of hurry, what propels this need to hurry and be busy, is often feelings of inadequacy and insecurity, that we try and compensate and make ourselves feel more valuable by doing stuff all the time. God, look what I'm doing. Hey, people, look what I'm doing. Look what I'm building. Yeah. And so that's something that I've recognized in myself, and something that God has for years been saying, breathe, slow down. And something that God has been saying to me for a while that I'm still trying to learn is that our value is simply completely in our identity, and our identity is that we're a child of God, and nothing that I say or do will ever add to or take away from that. So no matter what I build or don't build or do or don't do, nothing will ever change that identity. And there's something really freeing about that. Still forget it at times, and still kind of default back into that, woo, like we're doing all this stuff.
Do you like the rush?
I think I like how the rush makes me feel successful.
Right.
And I hate that the rush makes me feel successful. And just being honest,
You're a mess,
I don't.
Dave.
Yeah,
You're a
I
mess.
am. I don't want to. I don't want to find success in that. And so I think it's a slow process of God kind of undoing and unlearning that.
Learning about your seasons and your times, right?
For sure.
There's a time to be busy, and there's a time to stop, and a time to rest. Yeah.
I also think, positively, it's helped me reflect on playing to our strengths. I growing up, seeing parents who are pastors, not that they ever said this or taught this, but I had this idea based on all of the preachers, pastors that I saw at events and things like that a pastor was this like one kind of person, that they were hyper extroverted, that they were super charismatic speaker, that they were, dominated all the things, and they were just this kind of one thing. And again, a slow process of God showing me that there's so many different kinds of pastors, every kind of personality and gifting mix. And, instead of always focusing on, I don't have that gift, playing to strengths, and leaning into the gifts that God has. Not that we can't, fine tune things, but instead of trying to be something that I'm not, being who God has made me to be, and understanding my personality is such and fine tuned for me to be able to sow seeds at Ryerson and to welcome prodigal sons and daughters home at Ryerson. There's something really freeing about that. Yeah.
Dave, I want to thank you for your time today. And before we go, I'm gonna ask you if you would actually pray in proxy for students of post-secondary right across Canada. And if we start to add up those numbers, it's in the hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million. I don't know. Maybe you know the stats, but there are definitely hundreds of thousands of students, many right now, who are being delayed because they can't go, in many cases, to that campus in September 2020. They have to be online, or they have labs, but they don't have live classes. The student life aspects are not there, and it seems like such a kairos moment, one of those unique times that God can really use. And I would like you to, if you would, just pray for students from coast to coast, and just that they would be able to discern the Lord during this time. And who knows what kind of things God wants to awaken and what God wants to do. So would you just close us out in prayer today?
Yeah, I'd love to. Papa, we thank you for the fact that in this season of difficulty and suffering and angst to this pandemic that we're all walking through, I thank you that you are not absent, that you are not an absentee Father, you are not a distant God, but that you are near, that you are close, that you are here, God, for every person that is listening to these words, watching or listening to this podcast, God, that you are in their midst. And so, God, I ask that you would, as Kevin said, reawaken something in us, that as in the Psalms, David says, you would awake my soul, that you would awake our soul, that you would open our eyes and ears to your glory all around us, God, that we might be filled with a deep sense of wonder the God who created all, the sun, the moon, the stars, and us, God, that you desperately love your creation. So, Father, I pray for every student on post-secondary campuses across our nation, God, as they are preparing and trying to figure out what September is going to look at. God, I ask that you would begin to awaken or reawaken something in each one of them, God, that they would begin to feel the call of your Holy Spirit to come home. And God, that the campus ministries and local churches across our nation, God, that you would awaken us, God, give us a renewed passion, a renewed zeal to be able to welcome prodigal sons and daughters home. God, may you give students clarity as to what to do and how to do it. God, may this fall not be a season of pause or a season of a means to an end, but Father, may we recognize that your presence is still moving, that the song is still being sung, that the painting is still being painted, and God, may you open our eyes and our ears to that. May you awake our souls, I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, I'll give a big old hearty amen to that too. Thank you, David.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And so glad that you could be here with me in downtown Hamilton today to have this conversation. And you and your family and Giselle are in my prayers for the work that God has ahead at Ryerson University, and I would invite all the listeners to be praying for you as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Pleasure.
And that's David Burke. I really like that guy. He also, along with his wife Krysten, have a series that they've started on YouTube. David is very candid and open on their YouTube series about struggles that he had early in life with mental health. And we're going to put a link to David and Krysten on YouTube in our show notes, as well as other links where you can connect with David and Lifeline at Ryerson. And I would also encourage you, if you're looking for a worthy cause, to go in our show notes, find the link, and do what you can to support the work of David. On our next episode, we're going to be talking to Debbie Kunst from Father's House in downtown Edmonton. Downtown Edmonton, like most major centers, has some pockets of extreme poverty. And Debbie is a pastor who runs a church called Father's House. It's a church, but it's a mission, but it's a church. And I think we need lots of urban churches like Father's House. So stay tuned to our next episode, dropping on the 1st of the month, to hear Debbie Kunst, my interview with her. And I hope that you're enjoying our podcast. We're endeavoring to talk to people all across the nation, doing incredible things in urban ministry. Well, until next time, you know who I am. I'm Kevin Rogers, and this is Sidewalk Skyline. Thanks for listening.